Cheers again. I think that may be the first time I gave 2 cheers in one video. What do you think about that? I'm trying to get everything in order here. Sorry. We'll get started. What did you think of my video yesterday? Did you like that role play? No ads in the middle. Did it help you sleep? I hope so. Somebody on my channel recently told me that they really liked the episode with measuring. I don't have my tape measure with me, do I? No, but we can pretend, can't we? And of course I used my own numbers to show you what's possible with money over time. Yeah. As long as you have income, which most of you do, that is what's possible. And if you build your budget like we talked about a couple days ago, how many of you, by show of hands, raise your hand if you created a budget after Monday's episode for April through March of 2026. You can have your own fiscal year. It doesn't have to be a calendar year. In fact, for many years I had a fiscal year because I used to get a bonus at a certain point during the year. And at one time, I used my bonus, the net of the bonus, as part of my operating budget, which is a little risky because you can't always predict or know or expect. What's the word I'm looking for? You can't. It's not guaranteed that you'll have a bonus. There's a word, I just can't think of it. If I think of it when I edit the video, I'll put it in. But when I wasn't making that much money, yes, because I knew I was getting a bonus every year, and it pretty much was consistent. My company was very consistent. A lot of times I used that in my operating budget, and then I backed paid things that I fronted onto my credit card, which is not a good idea, but it was the reality of where I was living at that time. You gotta do what you gotta do. And then once I got to a point where my salary covered everything, including fun and other and savings, then my bonus went pretty much all into my 401k. Yeah. So anyway, I'm still wearing my jacket. I'm preparing for the rainy season in Florida where I ride my bike to the gym, and this will keep me all protected. Anyway, by the way, I may have mentioned this before, but I don't like driving my car very much. I'm kind of like Mr. Money Mustache. Do you guys know him? I've talked about him once before. Pete Adney. He lives in Colorado. He's a Canadian. He's got a blog, and he talks about financial independence. He's been blogging and talking about money since 2005. He loves to use his own body weight for working out. He rides his bike everywhere. I think that is just so cool to know that you have the means to do things with money, but you restrict and you don't do it. I think is the coolest thing ever. It probably is one of the single most important thoughts that I've ever had that helped me build wealth. It taught me to be frugal and to be okay with it, that it was cool to be frugal, right? That's what you need to know. In fact, there's a realtor in town, which I've talked about before. Back in the mid-90s, I was impressed with her because I knew she was really wealthy, but she drove this really old car. The car was like 20 years old. Now, of course, it was a Mercedes or a BMW or something, but she kept it forever, even though she could pay for more. And her house, even though it was a big mansion, it was kind of like falling apart. The bricks were falling. Not really falling apart, but she was a little bit disheveled, which I thought was kind of hilarious, and always wore the same clothes. I don't know. I just find that really fascinating. So, moving on, what are we going to talk about today? I forgot to look. Today is Wednesday, March 26th. My working title for this is Denial is Not a River in Egypt. Denial is not a river in Egypt. And yes, I still have my trigger of the week, which is this little clay pot. Or I guess it's a jar too, right? So be thinking about denial. The Nile is a river in Egypt, but not denial. So it's a saying that people use sometimes. They use that saying, denial is not a river, because denial is something very different, right? Denial is not being in reality and not being aware of where a person is in life in some regard. And so I'm going to tie it together with a financial topic today as soon as I get my thoughts together and as soon as you relax. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story today. I remember when I was in denial for a long time, and it was back in the mid-90s when I was spending lots of money on my credit cards from age 24 to 29. I amassed $40,000 of credit card debt. I lost my job. I was miserable. I never felt that I could ever be successful with money. Many of you are new to my channel. You may not have known that I suffered a bankruptcy at age 29. A bankruptcy that changed my life forever. It changed who I would become. And I never looked back, and I never made those mistakes again. Those years I was in denial. I had very little motivation. And even in those years, those early years when I was starting to build wealth, like 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, I did not have motivation, and I had very little belief in myself. But I will say that I turned denial into another word that begins with the letter D. And that word is discipline. I knew above all else that if I did not have motivation, I could still learn the principles and practice discipline. My mom came to visit me here in Florida in 2008. We jumped in my car and we drove to Fort Myers, Florida, to see a friend of hers. And this was a woman that I knew as I was growing up in the town that I grew up in. She was our neighbor, and her name was Josephine, and everybody called her Joe. So my mom and I go and we visit Joe for the day, and I decided to confide in her and my mom, and I told them that I was really struggling with motivation, money. I don't know that I mentioned the bankruptcy, although my mom knew about it, but I remember distinctly sitting on the balcony looking at the water, because she lived on the beach. And we proceeded to have a 30-minute conversation about the fact that I was in denial for many years and that I was willing to make a change. And Joe actually had a successful career. And so I started to pick her brain, and I confided in her, and I said, how can I do better with money? What are the things that I need to do? And I told her I was a fan of the Susie Orman show, and I was watching, and I was building up my emergency fund, and I was starting to save. And I told her I wanted to be successful long term. And I'll never forget what she told me. She said, Rome was not built in a day. Rome was not built in a day. And that stuck with me. Because when I was a lot younger, I always thought that I had to build wealth, like, really fast. Like I was going to get a job that was paying me $500,000 a year, and I was going to expedite the whole process. I wasn't even sure what that process was. I just knew I thought I had to be rich. And then I learned through that quote that things take so much time, especially building wealth. And she said that it would be easier to build wealth slowly and build on every single year rather than trying to do it quickly and through means that may not be the best. She said, Evan, you've got a good job, right? And I said, yes. I said, I'm in a great career path. There are people in my department that have been there for many years. And she said, well, you know what? They would not be there for many years if the company did not treat them well. And so I knew it. I knew that I had this wonderful opportunity to do well. The company that I work for also did well through recessions, and sure enough, we were coming up on the greatest recession since the Great Depression. And so she just instilled in me that belief that it would take a long time. On my channel before, I've talked about my survival years. My survival years were really, my entire early adult life. I wasn't saving a penny. From my first job in 1990 to the bankruptcy in 1995, 1996 to 2006, those 10 years, maybe 11 years, I was just surviving. The budget that I told you about on Monday's episode had my essential expenses, a little bit for fun, and other. And that was it. During those years, I built up the skill sets to be frugal so that when the money did come, meaning a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more every year, I had already a decade of being frugal and being on top of my money so that it wasn't on top of me. You don't want to lose sight of your money or it will take over your life. You've got to be on top of your money, and the only way that I knew that I could do it was by building my budget and seeing that vision in advance that we talked about on Monday. So, with every phase of life, survival years, your thriving years, you'll get to a point like where I got to, and I realized that I had built an engine really large. You guys know that have been with me. We talk about it all the time. And in fact, I'll be talking more about it on Friday's episode, so come back. Because, as I mentioned on Monday, I'm going to teach you how you can live your life for free. If you do the work when you're younger and you continue to build that engine, you get to a point where essentially you're living for free. Right now I'm going through one of the biggest adjustments in life. And I'm so happy that in January I decided to try life without corporate America, with no job, with no income coming in. I had almost 100% certainty that I had made the right decision, and I still believe I made the right decision. Here it is, 3 months later, and I'm recalibrating. Like I've talked about before, it's going to take another probably 9 months. All of 2025 is about rediscovering self, rediscovering who Evan is and who Evan wants to become. I don't mean to sound all dramatic, but it's true. All of you, if you continue to do the things you need to do with money, you'll get to a point where you can no longer say to yourself that you need that job, and you can quit and you can have a different life, a life that you are 100% in control of. And again, we'll talk more about it on Friday, because I'll have my thoughts in order about the concept of living for free. 2025 for me is going to be the most significant year of my life. It's, like I said, an adjustment. It's a recalibration. It's now figuring out on some level and being so proud of what I was able to achieve, and now making sure that I don't blow it, that I give myself time to do that adjustment, to get things right, so that I can really truly discover what I want to do with the time that I have. I bought this time. I spent years building the engine that creates the time that I now have. So, denial then is not a river in Egypt. Denial is something that you have to conquer. Like right now, when you're young, you've got to conquer that. And I'll never forget what Joe told me. Again, that Rome was not built in a day. And she said, you will not be built in a day either, Evan. It will take time. But you will said, "You're doing great." You know, and to hear those words from other people in your life, somebody that I don't know like Susie and somebody I do know like Joe, those words resonate with you and they keep you going when times are bad, when you don't have motivation, when you need and you give yourself the discipline that helps get you to where you need to be. So with that, everybody, I think I'll go ahead and close out this episode. Thank you so much for being here. Give me a thumbs up. If you like content like this, consider subscribing if you have not done so. And I will see you next time. Oh crap, I have to edit that out. I still have my trigger of the week.